I am Mansi Jain. How are you all? Now, today we are going to study something very interesting. I am going to tell you a very interesting and a very beautiful story, the last lesson, which is authored by Alphonse Daudet. Now, see, the author of this story, that is Mr. Alphonse Daudet, was a French novelist and a short story writer. This story, the last lesson, is set in the days of Franco-Prussian War. In this war, France was defeated by Prussia. And in this story, the French districts of Alsace and Lorraine have passed into Prussian hands. So we will be basically reading the effects that this has on the life at school. The narrator of the story is a small boy, Franz. Now what happened one day that he started for school very late in the morning, and he was so very terrified because he was scared that Mr. M. Hamel would scold him, since that particular day they were going to be questioned on participles and he knew nothing on participles. Nothing at all. So he was very terrified. Now when he was passing by the woods, he looked all around him and the weather was so warm, so bright, the birds were chirping at the edge of the woods, and in the open field back of the sawmill, he saw that the Prussian soldiers were drilling. Now it was so very tempting, you can understand that since he did not like the thought of being questioned on participles at all, he was so very tempted to just run away and spend the day outside instead of going in the class. But from somewhere inside him, he found the strength to resist the temptation and hurried off to his school. Now, when he was passing the town hall, he saw a large crowd gathered around a bulletin board. Now, that particular bulletin board had been providing them all the bad news for the past 2 years. Bad news as in the lost battles and the draft and the orders of the commanding officers. And so he thought to himself, what can be the matter now? Now as he hurried as fast as he could go, a blacksmith watcher who was reading the bulletin board asked him to walk slowly, saying that you will reach school in plenty of time, do not worry. And for a moment Franz thought that probably he was just joking, he was kidding, he was making fun of him. So he nevertheless ran as fast as he could. The result being that when he reached the school, he was all out of breath. Now, normally what happened was, when the school began, there was a great bustle. Reason being the opening and closing of desks and the lessons that the students repeated very loudly, and the rapping of the teacher's great ruler. But that day it was so silent, it was so still, and Franz wondered why. He had really, depended upon the commotion to reach to his desk. Basically, Franz did not want to catch attention of anyone. But alas, that day it was very quiet and still. So you can just imagine his embarrassment and his fear. So you can imagine how frightened and embarrassed Franz was when he had to walk in front of everybody. Mr. M. Hamel asked him very politely to go and sit on his desk. So without wasting any more time, Franz jumped over the bench and sat down on his desk. Only when he got over his fright did he notice the attire of his teacher. Now, Mr. M. Hamel was wearing his Sunday clothes that day. He was wearing a beautiful green coat and frilled shirt and a little black silk cap. And Mr. M. Hamel used to wear these clothes only on inspection and prize days. So Franz was very surprised. And the most astonishing thing that he noticed was that the back benches that had always been empty were not empty that day. The village people were sitting quietly over there, and old Hauser was sitting over there with his primer, the former postmaster and several others. and everybody looked so solemn, so sad. And Franz wondered why, and while he was wondering all this, Mr. M. Hamel announced, and the announcement shocked him to his core. This was what Mr. M. Hamel said: "My children, this is the last lesson I shall give you. The order has come from Berlin to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. The new master comes tomorrow. This is your last French lesson. I want you to be very attentive." So basically what happened was, an order had come from Berlin, and it had demanded to teach only German in those schools, in the schools of basically Alsace and Lorraine. So now Mr. M. Hamel had to leave the next day, and this was their last French lesson. So that was when Franz realized that Mr. M. Hamel had worn his beautiful Sunday clothes in the honor of the last lesson, and he was thunderstruck. He was shocked to his core. As such, he had not liked studying, and he had always preferred wasting his time like seeking birds' eggs or going sliding on the Saar. So the books that had seemed a burden to him, he had thought, "Oh, they are so heavy to carry." The grammar, the history of the saints, they seemed like old friends now, and he did not want to give them up. And even M. Hamel, when he thought that Mr. M. Hamel was going to leave forever, he realized that he did not want his teacher to go as well. Though he had always found his teacher cranky. He had not really liked Mr. M. Hamel very much, which we realize from the first few paragraphs of the story, when he says that he wanted to go run off. He wanted to run off and spend the day outside instead of attending the class. But now he was so shocked, and he did not want the lesson to be their last French lesson, because he realized that he did not even know how to write it. He wanted to learn more. He did not want to stop over there. But alas, the time had come when he must stop, and this thought struck him like a slap. He was guilty, and then what happened was that Mr. M. Hamel called his name and asked him to recite, and he so very desperately wanted to recite the rule for the participle clearly and loudly. He did not want to make any mistake, but alas, he fumbled on the first few words and stood there holding on to his desk, and his heart was beating, and he was so guilty, so embarrassed that he could not recite the rule. Mr. M. Hamel does not scold Franz. He says that is the problem of Alsace. Alsace always keeps on postponing learning for tomorrow. So this is what he says: "I won't scold you, little Franz. You must feel bad enough. See how it is? Every day we have to say to ourselves, bah, I have plenty of time. I'll learn it tomorrow. And now you see where we have come out." So he wants to say that you keep on postponing everything, and now the time has come when you do not have any time left. And now those fellows out there will mock you by saying, "You pretend to be Frenchmen. You can neither speak nor write your own language. But you are not the worst poor little Franz." So here he says that you are not the one who is to blame. You are not the only one who is to blame. He blames himself. He blames parents also of the students. How does he blame them? He says that, see, now let's move forward. He says that your parents were not anxious enough to have you learn. They preferred to put you to work on a farm or at the mills so as to have a little more money. So here he says that your parents preferred earning money to your education. So your parents are to blame as well. And I have been to blame also. How? Have I not often sent you to water my flowers instead of learning your lessons? And I wanted to go fishing. Did I not just give you a holiday? So he blames himself also. And from one thing to another, Mr. M. Hamel goes on talking about the French language, saying that it is the most beautiful language in the world, the clearest, the most logical, and that we must guard it among us and never forget it. Why? Because when people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is as if they had the key to their prison. So he wants to say that holding on to one's language is a key to freedom. And then Mr. M. Hamel opened their grammar and started reading them their lesson, and Franz was so amazed to see how well he understood it. Everything seemed so easy to him, the things that he had never been able to understand. Basically, he never listened to anything, he was never interested in learning. But that very day, since he had realized that that was their last French lesson, he listened to everything attentively and he understood everything, and he also realized that Mr. M. Hamel had never explained everything with so much patience. It seemed that his teacher wanted them to learn everything in their last lesson. And following the grammar lesson came the writing lesson. In their writing lesson, they were given new and beautiful notebooks, and in the notebooks, these words were written in beautiful in round hand. France, Alsace, France, Alsace, France, Alsace. Now this created a feeling of patriotism in all the students, and they wrote everything very attentively. The only noise that could be heard in the room was the scratching of the pens. Why? Because everyone was involved in writing their lessons instead of wasting time, instead of looking here and there, which they usually did. And then what happened was, Franz saw some pigeons cooing, and he wondered, will they make them sing in German too, even the pigeons? So this shows that now Franz is irritated. He is unhappy with the fact that they cannot learn French anymore. And that was when the church clock struck 12. At the same moment, the trumpets of Prussians returning from drill. I told you, when he was walking through the woods, he saw Prussians drilling. So now the Prussians were returning from the drill, and the trumpets sounded under their windows. Mr. M. Hamel stood up, very pale in his chair, and Franz had never seen him look so tall. Now Mr. M. Hamel tried to say something. He wanted to say something, but he could not. He could not gather the courage to say anything at all. So he simply wrote down these words on the board: Vive la France. The meaning of these words is long live France. And after writing these words, Mr. M. Hamel tried to say something, but he couldn't. So he just dismissed the class through a gesture, asking them, telling them the class is over now and they can go. So what is the conclusion of this lesson? Basically, this chapter shows us that our language, our mother tongue, is very important. You must hold on to that language, you must learn it, and you must pay attention to your education. It is very important. Now in this first lecture, I basically told you the whole story, and in the next lecture we will be studying about the summary of this lesson, and we will be doing questions, NCERT questions and examination questions, past examination questions. So if you study like this, you will be able to learn the whole chapter in this lecture itself. Thank you. Have a nice day.